What's good, everybody? It's King here. Welcome to another form of versus battle. As you see by the title and the thumbnail, I have two characters of interesting fame of being the most elite swordswomen, skilled, renowned, and experienced people in their own individual right, with the great Freya of Vanir, great goddess of nature, magic, and all type of different interesting regard, ex-wife of Odin, the Allfather, and one of the most powerful of the Aesir, and of God of War. First is Malenia, the undefeated swordswoman, a character I've talked about multiple times on this channel. And ironically, I will start off first when it comes down to talking about things. But if you are new, please leave a like, subscribe, comment, share, and subscribe. And please enjoy why Freya versus Malenia is not close. Malenia is the daughter of Queen Marika and Radagon, two people who are mixed to believe were not the same at birth or at first. They were formed to each other by the greater will to create something of greater purpose, or have them both be tied to the same fate, as Queen Marika was trying to differ from the Golden Order, while someone like Radagon was trying to be the ultimate warrior of it. Through them being together, they had different cases of varying children, with the first being the case of Mesmer, which is arguably mixed interpretation to be either a asexual child of Queen Marika or be Queen Marika and Mesmer's first child in between a multi-case at different time, which is very weird, but this Elden Ring lore get crazy just to keep going on forward. Queen Marika and Radagon's iconic children are the two twin prodigies, Malenia and Mikola. Them both being twins, they're supposed to be of the same age, but Malenia would actually grow more formally, but would be cursed with the Scarlet Rot, a curse from an outer god of a whole different type of proportions of strength, and being next to Frenzied Flame, one of not in grand scale devastation to the lands between on a core baseness, the most terrifying. As Scarlet Rot is a disease that is a manifestation to the mind and does a bunch of different devastation to one's soul, it seems like in the mix. Not in a conceptual sense, but pretty much is the ultimate plague like no other. Imagine Black Plague and COVID. And this was shown in the means of Caelid, where it done an atomic level amount of devastation, nuked the plane, and eradicated everything off the census, making it literally look like Florida. That right there would alone be a country level feat with the mass and case of obviously proportional size of all of Caelid, and just the pure fact that Malenia, with doing this, changed the entire case of atmosphere and the land and a bunch of different aspects of it that would make it at low end a country level thing to reasonably multi-country, depending how you perceive what a full blossom of a goddess of rock could do. But that's just left alone right there. This also has big damaged her psychologically and physically, as the Scarlet Rot has cursed her so much as ate away at her normal proportional body parts, taking away her right arm, taking away parts of her leg, and obviously making her blind. Now, how she's able to fight blind is because a random blue wandering swordsman took pity on her and taught her the ways of the sword, and allows her to have so much resilience even against all possible adversity against her, to be able to fight with a blade that's literally one along with her. She was granted prosthetics, aka granted augmentation, by her little twin brother to allow her to be able to fight so skillfully and proficiently, even with her being, at always disadvantage. With that being said, she would get an augmented right arm that is attached with a blade that is one with her body, and showcase her being one of the most skilled, efficient swordswomen in the entire lands between, being undefeated, being a fierce, efficient, never defeating general that is able to body anybody in her way across the lands between, as she was the main dominating figure in the case of the Shattering, going across all the lands between, all the way from the Halletree at the bottom of the mountaintops of the giants, and laying siege and smackdown to anyone that got in her way, making a bitch of Godric, which is not too hard to do, and multiple times being stated by not just people in verse, by Sir Gideon, who is a very big knowledge keeper and renowned dude in knowledge, right? As stalking us, knowing the capabilities of these different demigods, and even taking aspects of their capabilities, stating to be the ultimate warrior, a demigoddess like no other, running from multiple different people, and no other demigod, arguably, except for the mixed bag most renowned people like Mesmer, Radon, Morgoth, and most importantly, Godwyn the Golden, could be on the same extremes in fame of her. But the pure fact of her skill being so much of these high revered stands, that makes her be someone to not be trifled with. Eventually, she would come to blows with her older half-brother, Starscourge Radon, Conqueror of the Stars, King of the Battlefield's Lion, the Red Fame Boy himself, the GOAT. They would lock horns in combat and was said by Ronnie and multiple times stated to be the mightiest demigods of the Shatterin. With Radon being older, stronger, and having way more capabilities like no other, this would then again make her be one of the most strongest demigods, to being the strongest by a statement said where if Malenia was not tired, battered, and bruised from the countless fighting across the Shatterin and the battle in Caelid, that she could have either had the same fate as in the means needing to blossom and take out Radon, or it could have been a more decisive victor, as they stalemated / drawed, as again, Radon and Malenia fighting in the Shatterin had a lot of stuff going on, but Radon was more of a physical stand, aka being more physically ready, while someone like Malenia was more down and out, and when taking up her prosthetic arm was not on the same means, and this is said by a co-director to producer of Elden Ring, right, as known by Miyazaki, has all the proof in the pudding and all different accounts in Revel. So, as I explained in my shameless plug, Radon versus Malenia, who was stronger in Y video, I explained that Malenia countless times has multiple revered statements and scaling and assumption of matter for being way more stronger than what is shown in game, and same time being obviously stronger than Radon for multiple reasons, especially with the fact that, simply put, Shawty is just a very built different swordswoman, and no one in the verse should arguably be able to scale to this skill and same time fame, except for the people I mentioned before, which even then, Malenia has all the criteria to build the best, especially when we consider her ascension into godhood. But yeah, simply put, Malenia is definitely built for fights like no other, and is just an ultimate fighter, to say the least, right? But it isn't just in her blossoming to scaling to, Radon, who, because of conquering the stars and controlling stars of such a vast regard, would make her going from low M, like multi-dwarf store level, like capabilities, or consistently and reasonably because of how much vastly his stars are. The case of him, capturing and defeating, besting, shattering, crushing, star controlling, nebula making aliens in Astal and the star destroying beast, would make Radon reasonably a multi-solar system to universal level character at a bare minimum. She's able to harm him, he's able to do these things to these people, and using the stars or not, and whatever with his gravity magic, which has been shown in the fight, reasonably should make that be the case. Ty will also just the pure fact that obviously she is able to, scale to these things by the greatest regard, with harming and obviously giving him stage 69 brain cancer, that would give her reasonable scale there. But what really gets both of them to reasonably universal and a great deal of people is the fact that Ronnie has a statement about being able to create a universal pocket dimension in the second phase of Ranala, with a statement given by Hidetoki Miyazaki himself, where he states that, simply put, he wanted the universe to come alive within her second phase, and with that being said, be shown through magic. There's also the fact that glintstone magic comes from different important parts of the universe is explained in greater detail. There's how with the fact that, all these people having a split part from Queen Medica and Radagon, who are all, grace with power of the greater will, especially because the Elden Ring is life in the lands between, not just the tarnish, but mixed bag perception to also be a way to give greater preservation and at the same time balance to people, which is more of a, cosmology factor that doesn't necessarily tie into full way of actual power stand, but you can give reasonable criteria to simply say that yes, Malenia, like others, should be scanning from a multi-solar system to universal scale. When it comes down to speed, it should be obvious that with Radon being able to scale to stars and other things along those lines, that simply put, Malenia should be able to be scaling on the good deal mid relativistic to multiple times faster than light on a great deal of reason, as being able to scale and combat people that's able to make nebulas crack up to stars randomly at this speed, being able to scale to stars, compete with that, shown in the case of Constant Radon's, boss fight, where he's literally beaming off light, moving at the speed of light consistently. That should reasonably make her, like them and everyone else, be reasonably massively faster than light. Freya, great goddess of the Vanya, ex-queen to the queen of the Valkyries, one of the most strongest, dangerous, and very tenacious allies of Kratos, having skill, great reveredness, and magic and capabilities like no other. Freya is the older sister of great god Freyr, a swordsman with the great blade Ingrud, and with this being said, was the most highest revered, hailed, and respected warrior and goddess of the Vanir in all different record, right? She was queen to her people, she was a great warrior, and had to make a peace treaty, basically bondage of herself, and went into slavery being a wife of the great tyrant, Odin the Allfather, father of most of the Aesir, and with that being said, was put for all different type of mental dilemma and tragedy with bearing his child, and as well giving him the secrets to her people and all different allure of all the different case of magic that he is famed to use. Besides her lore, when it comes down to her scaling and all different hells, she has all different type of scaling that puts her in a very high regard, as she would reasonably be scaling over her own son, Balder, who scales to God of War 4. Kratos to a great deal scales to Kratos himself in the matter for being able not to only surprise him in the matter for speedless random encounter, but also being able to harm him, throw him around, rock with him, and has multiple statements in regards for her being equal and possible form of fighting against him, being able to stand very easily and reasonably relative strong to him. With that being said, has multiple showcases in regards for skill, prowess, and acclaim, especially by the words of her second in command, second most powerful Valkyrie, being the most challenging person at the end of God of War 2018, in the case for Sigyn, the ex-Valkyrie queen. And in comparison to Norse mythology, it is reasonable to go and consider Sigyn is a master tactician and veterinar of all different forms of combat and different things of that regard, that reasonably should put her in very high regard knowledge of actually what someone like Freya can do and withstand and do things in. And that to me reasonably gives her not only in all different regards shine of skill, prowess, and same time reasonable accolades for being one of the most top tier combatants and in all of Ragnarok, and same time against Kratos and beyond, but the fact that she overscales the case of her brother, even with Ingrud, she would be able to not only be doing things of very high crack regard and magic and combat skill, as she would reason be able to hold off the blade of Surtur way more better than this man Freyr when he was obviously holding back Ragnarok, but as well would scale over Kratos as some mixed matter of relativization to Gná, who she's able to combat more effortlessly and easily and more, raw, pit for pit, bang for bang, while Kratos struggles a little bit more. Now, I'm not saying she's full stronger than Kratos, but I believe that she has reasonable relativization and accounting to be on the same scale in regard as Kratos, right? Multiple times consistently, has multiple statements and accounts, especially by Kratos, of being a very powerful ally, being just in the same regard as strong and or as skilled as other people, like in the sense of Heimdall, and as well the case of Thor. And she's put in pretty high respect and show great magical usage, great tacticalness, great utilization of all different arts against someone like Odin, and multiple times over consistently is someone not to be trifled with. With all these statements, all this scaling to be said, where she would actually scale an AP from all this would reasonably get her from multiple times of low multiversal to reasonably on a great sense of complex, not only because scaling to Kratos, who's able to scale to Thor, who's able to shake all of Yggdrasil, all the 9 realms, with clashing with Jormungandr, sending him back in time before his own birth, but also with multiple different forms of different initiative scale to people like Heimdall and other people like that reasonably should get him and or, record for her on those same scuff and scale of ridiculous power and or measurement of skill and things along those lines. So, reasonably regardless how you see it, she would scale to multiple different multiversal sense of matter concepts and things along those lines, and should reasonably scale pretty high end with that. With speed, with this being said, at a low end, she's easily multiple times massively faster than light, but because of scaling to, again, these people who scale to all different mixed matter, different shit, should reasonably be scaling at low end and accessible, not being, bound to finite sense of time, but reasonably as well counting for immeasurable, as she does not be affected by different concepts and aspects of that, and she was confident, at least to some extent, being willing to fight Heimdall with Kratos. And even though I think Heimdall and her is a very mixed contingent fight, depending on how you perceive the good or regards of statement this and this and that, especially with the scenario at hand, depending on how you perceive Heimdall. I think the fact is that she reasonably should scale at people like Heimdall, Kratos obviously, Thor, Tyr even, Odin, and people, even in the case like, Balder, Magni, Modi, and beyond, and, especially over Atreus and Bolthorn himself, even with the record for, Kratos holding back Atreus when he became a bear, or whatever the case may be. So if it isn't obvious with all the scaling that I put into mind, and I'm even talking about all matter of measurement and skill that she should stand to, obviously, scaling to people of the most highest regard of skill, not just with magic and what she can do, and the fact that she was doing better against Niflheim than Kratos to some matter of extent, and was obviously able to close off not just the, dimensional rift portal, right, that Niflheim made, and was able to split the case of the head of the big protector of the 9 realms, right? But with all her Vanir magic and doing all this nature manipulation like Poison Ivy out here, moving like Swamp Thing, she's able to pull a lot of creative mix-up, unique ties of different, ray of magic that would reasonably be able to allow her to really out-hacks a lot of people. And so that being helpful against Niflheim to be able to close the case of that fucking reality warp and portal would reasonably give her grace and initiation being higher than what you could even think. But yeah, I just want to kind of really put that into perspective that, there's an obvious, she outscales Malenia 1,000 times over. It's not even funny. She one-shots, speed blitz, can entrap her, suffocate her, take her out before she can realize. So with that being said, that is where, the actual count for scaling is taken into play. But what about if we equal the stats? I still think because of all of Freya's skills, scaling, accolades, feats, all type of shit like that, she reasonably should be beyond the comprehension of someone like Malenia, even when Malenia arguably having a very tricky, whoppy-doo, weird form of, speed and skill that, Freya has never seen. Freya's own skill is on par with people of the most elite regard, and someone like Malenia can be defeated by someone who has mixed notion of different mixed matter of skill, and just being so undoubtedly way more stronger and powerful than others in comparison. I would say that reasonably she should win. Even if we're talking about rot and the fact that if she did rot, it would be a very interesting thing for Freya to try to combat, especially at equal stats. Freya has tech, when it comes down to actual usage of her capabilities and things along those lines that could be utilized to outmaneuver that, not just from her having armor mixed crack with, the tech in mind being technique and technical usage of the area, depending on where it takes place, especially if it does take place in Kaled or, at the Halleck tree itself. She should be able to perform greater speed and or magic to not only make defense, but to get herself out of dodge. She also can fly, just like Malenia if she goes into Goddess of Ra. I think that, if Ra actually somehow was able to hit her, she would be able to counter it and be able to stop the manifestation before it actually hits. But if she did get actually full blossom speared like Malenia did Radon, I do think it would be the end for her. But I do also think there's very much reasoning to say that she would be able to counteract Rot before it actually does go about, full blossoming on her. I think in the end, regardless if Malenia goes about blossoming, Freya survives and she goes into Goddess of Rot, it would just be more of a very engaging fight. But regardless how you see it, Freya has more experience, more tactical mind, greater scaling, better accolades, better scaling of all different type of merit, to say reasonably so that she should best the case of the undefeated swordswoman. Malenia will most likely get teared to shreds regardless how you see it. And yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you learned something, let me know how y'all feel down in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos like this, Please like, share, subscribe, comment. Really helps me out. And yeah, I love y'all. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Peace out, Army. Love y'all.